It all started with a ring. Not the simple one we wore on our wedding day, but the one I bought months later, the one that was supposed to prove my promise. Instead, it revealed the stranger I had married. One glance at that diamond and the mask she wore slipped, and for the first time, I saw the greed, the hunger, the rage. I thought I was giving her love. What I gave her was a mirror, and she hated what it showed. This is a story of how my wife's obsession with status shattered everything, and how I chose to shatter her mask in return. The night the city went quiet, my phone lit up with her message. Working late, don't wait up. It should have been ordinary. Lately, even ordinary felt rehearsed, like lines meant to keep the play going. I set the phone face down and listened to the refrigerator hum. The pipes tick. Our apartment sounded like a place made for two people moving in the same direction. I wasn't sure we were. In our first 6 months, darkness was our favorite country. We had sex because we were curious and greedy for each other, because maps are useless unless you draw them yourself. We married at the courthouse on a lunch break. 2 signatures, 2 cheap bands from a glass case. For now, I told her, grinning, later I'll buy you something cool. She said she didn't care about carrots, only about us. Maybe that was peak us, broke, bright, and certain. I had a small business that kept the bills fed. She had a laugh that brought the neighbors over. We measured love in late breakfasts and rainstorms, not in logos. Then the ground shifted. She started circling dresses in glossy magazines, following boutiques the way I watched invoices. Her selfies sharpened. Captions got clever. When we were out, she checked her reflection more than the street. We built everything together, she told her friends, and I swallowed the fact I've been signing supplier contracts long before we met. You don't fact-check romance in front of an audience. When she asked for money for clothes, I didn't blink. She had always dressed well. But new language crept in: deserve, status, investment. The heat between us changed, too. We still touched, but sometimes it felt staged, like our bedroom had marks the scene required. After, she'd check her notifications and say she was too wired to sleep. I lay awake, counting the second between the blue glow and her next sigh. I told myself it was a phase. People molt. It doesn't mean they become snakes. Maybe that's why the idea of the ring stuck. I wasn't trying to buy love. I wanted to anchor us to the promise we'd made outside the courthouse. For now, then more. $5,000 wouldn't bankrupt me. It also wasn't nothing. The jeweler showed me a slim setting that caught light like a secret. I pictured her mouth going soft when she saw it, the way it used to when we were both still sure. I kept the velvet box in my jacket for a week. Every time we brushed shoulders, I almost pulled it out, but she was always getting ready, leaving, laughing into a phone tilted away from me. When I finally decided, the sky had rinsed itself clean from afternoon rain. She texted that she was with friends by the river. Perfect. I wrote back. They stood outside a cafe with too much glass. Shopping bags huddled at their feet like small pets. She faced the water, chin tilted, as if waiting for a camera. When I called her name, she turned, and for one heartbeat the pose dropped, and I saw my wife as she used to be, unguarded, glad. I touched the velvet at my pocket and moved closer. Her friends angled their bodies to watch. Remember what I said? I told her, trying to keep it light. For now, then something cool. I opened the box. Light leapt. The stone made a tiny star in its cradle. For a second, nothing happened. Then heat rose in her face, and the smile stiffened like wet cloth in a freeze. Her eyes flicked to her friends, then back to the ring, then up into me like I confessed an unforgivable secret. What is this? She asked, and the sugar fell out of her voice. Is this a joke? I blinked. It's... Look at this small stone, she said, loud enough for the street. Did you spend $300? You think I deserve this? A couple at the corner slowed. Her friends covered their mouths and giggled. The box felt suddenly heavy, as if it contained not a ring but a receipt for my mistake. I searched her face for the courthouse girl, the Saturday morning woman, the lover who used to drag me back to bed because the coffee could wait. She was nowhere in sight. In her place stood someone auditioning for a role with no lines for me. I thought you'd like it, I said, which sounded small as it left my mouth. I'm embarrassed, she snapped, turning so hard the bags rustled. I can't. She started walking, heels hitting the hardest parts of the pavement, voice rising into curses I'd never heard from her. I stood there, still holding the box open like a busker's hat, while cars exhaled and the river pretended to be a mirror. By the time I shut the lid, she was gone. I drove home with the window down and the radio off, tapping the wheel to keep from thinking. Our street looked normal until it didn't. The left side of my car was a confession written in steel. Long, pale scratches from headlight to trunk. 2 tires knelt into the curb. The passenger window had burst and collapsed across the seat in glittering sugar. I walked a slow circle, as if a different angle would make it sane. It didn't. Heat crawled up my neck. I unlocked the apartment and set the ring on the table under the lamp, proof I hadn't hallucinated generosity. The room felt staged the way her smile had, recognizable wrong. I kept seeing her face when the box opened, the way recognition slid out and performance slid in, the way deserve edge or tone, the way her friend's laughter had the mercy baked out of it. Midnight came and went. The door didn't move. I poured a drink and didn't taste it. Somewhere down the hall, a closet door tapped gently against its frame. The sound kept a patient rhythm, like a metronome for a song I hadn't learned. The ring on the table threw a thin halo in the lamplight, pretty useless. I slid the box into the drawer and turned the lock. For now, I said the empty room. Here in the courthouse and the cheap bands and that first rainstorm kiss. The words didn't feel like a promise anymore. They sounded like a warning. The police officer tapped his pen against a notepad, as if waiting for me to confess something I hadn't done. The streetlight buzzed above us, painting the wreck of my car in jaundiced yellow. "You're sure you don't know who did this?" he asked. I swallowed. Her face flashed in my mind, the way she turned on me with fire in her eyes over the ring. But I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. "Not yet. I have suspicions," I said carefully. He wrote that down. "We'll need access to the building surveillance." "Take it," I said, and I signed the paper with a hand that didn't feel like mine. Inside the apartment, I sat on the couch, shoes still on. The ring box was on the table, unopened now, but seemed to thrum with accusation. I had tried to make a promise tangible, and in return I had received only shards of glass and silence. She didn't come home that night. At sunrise, I found myself in the bedroom doorway, staring at the empty side of the bed. Her pillow still held a faint dent in her head, but the sheets were cold. I'd half expected her to stumble and drunk. Her anger burned out into exhaustion, but the apartment stayed hollow. When she did appear mid-morning, she breezed through the door like she had simply gone to yoga. Sunglasses, hair tied up, shopping bag in hand. She froze when she saw me sitting at the kitchen counter, and for a heartbeat her face betrayed something, guilt, maybe, or annoyance. "Morning," she said too casually. I gestured toward the window where my ruined car sat, taped off with a flimsy strip of police ribbon. "Did you see what happened?" She tilted her head, peering out. "Wow, who would do that?" "You tell me." My voice cracked like glass. She didn't flinch. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water and drank it in small, deliberate sips. "You shouldn't keep nice things out there. People get jealous." The calmness of it made me want to slam my fist into the counter. But I only asked, "Where were you last night?" "With friends." "Which friends?" "Why does it matter?" she snapped, finally turning to face me. "Because you didn't come home." She set the glass down hard enough to crack the rim. "Don't start with me. You embarrassed me yesterday, parading that tiny ring in front of everyone. Do you know how humiliated I felt?" I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Humiliated? I spent $5,000. I wanted to surprise you." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "5,000? Do you know what real rings cost? You should have saved your money." It was as if we were speaking 2 different languages. Hers made of status, mine of love. That afternoon, the police called. "We've reviewed the footage," the officer said. "It's clear who did it. You might want to sit down." I already knew. When I returned to the apartment, she was on the couch scrolling through her phone, her legs stretched out like she owned the place. "They have you on camera," I said quietly. Her head jerked up. "The police," scratching the car, slashing the tires, smashing the window. Color drained from her face, then came rushing back, blotchy with rage. "So what? You deserved it." I laughed, but it was hollow, foreign. "For what? For loving you? For trying?" "You humiliated me," she spat. "You gave me a cheap ring and made me look like a fool in front of my friends. Do you know what they'll think of me now? That I married below my level." Her words landed harder than any knife. Below her level. As if I were a rung she'd accidentally stepped down onto, waiting to be shaken off. That night, I couldn't look at her without feeling my chest burn. Desire hadn't left me. If anything, it twisted cruelly inside me, remembering her body under mine, her laugh in the dark. But now every memory was poisoned. We lay in bed, a gulf of silence between us. I wanted to reach for her, to prove she was still mine, but when I turned, she shifted away. "Not tonight," she whispered. The words were familiar, but now they felt final. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, replaying the moment by the cafe. Her voice rising in public scorn, her friends' giggles like knives. The woman beside me was not the woman I had married. Or maybe she had always been this, and I had just refused to see it. The next morning, I made coffee, poured it into her favorite mug, and placed it by her side of the bed. She blinked awake, frowned at me, then muttered thanks. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. The police asked what I wanted to do. You know what I told them? Her eyes narrowed. What? That I wanted you held responsible. That you should spend at least a day in jail. Because maybe then you'd understand what humiliation really feels like. She gasped, sitting upright. You wouldn't. I cut her off. I would. And I did. Her face crumpled, not in guilt but in fury. I walked away, leaving her with a mug of coffee and the echo of my words. For the first time since I slid that ring onto her finger in the courthouse, I felt like I had some control again. But control is a dangerous thing. It tastes like blood and victory. It makes you want more. And I knew, deep down, that my revenge had only just begun. Revenge is rarely clean. I'd imagine her face pressed against cold concrete, the steel door closing behind her for night. Maybe her pride stripped down enough that she'd see herself for what she'd become. But instead, the officers only held her for a few hours, long enough to remind her she wasn't untouchable. She came home with her hair tangled, eyes rimmed in red, and anger so sharp I thought it might cut the walls around us. You called the cops on me, she hissed, standing in the doorway. You destroyed my car. I replied evenly. Cause and effect. You're my husband. You were supposed to protect me, not shame me. I almost laughed. Protect her? She had humiliated me in public, turned my gesture of love into a spectacle, then taken her fury out on my property like a spoiled child. And now she wanted protection. I stepped closer, my voice low. You embarrassed yourself. All I did was stop pretending. Her lip trembled, then tightened into a sneer. She brushed past me, slamming the bedroom door. I let her have it. The whispers began within days. Her friends, the same ones who would giggle at my expense by the cafe, now had new material. The story of a wife dragged away in handcuffs for keying her own husband's car. At the grocery store, two women lingered near the fruit aisle, pretending to compare melons but clearly angling their ears toward us. One murmured, "That's her." The other laughed softly. "The one with the cheap ring?" My wife's spine stiffened. She abandoned her basket and stormed out. I followed slowly, savoring the sight of her armor cracking. At home, she threw her keys onto the counter and whirled on me. "You're letting them talk about me." "As opposed to what?" I asked, controlling their mouths. "You should defend me," she snapped. I defended myself. I said quietly. That night, she tried something new. She put on a silk slip I hadn't seen in months, brushed her hair out, and slid into bed smelling of perfume. She pressed her body against mine, hand wandering down my chest, lips grazing my ear. My body responded instantly. Months of rejection had left me starving. For a moment, I almost gave in. The heat of her thigh against mine, the soft brush of her breast against my arm, the whisper of her breath on my neck. It all pulled me back into the bed we once shared without hesitation. But then I remembered her voice in the cafe, cutting me down in front of her friends. I remembered the hiss of air escaping my slashed tires. I remembered the glass sparkling across my car seat. And I froze. She noticed instantly. Her hand stilled, her eyes narrowed. "What's wrong with you?" I turned my head, staring at the ceiling. "I don't want pity sex." "It's not pity," she said sharply. "It's..." She cut herself off. "It's control." I finished. She pulled away, muttering curses under her breath. The next morning, she tried a different tactic, spinning the story. On the phone with one of her friends, she laughed lightly, saying, "Oh, it was a misunderstanding. You know how men exaggerate." He blew it out of proportion. I stood in the kitchen doorway, listening, my fists clenched, but I didn't interrupt. Let her dig her own hole. Because what she didn't know was that her friends had already started whispering to me. One of them, bolder than the rest, pulled me aside in the parking lot a few days later. "She's been telling everyone she made you," the friend said, glancing around. "That you were nothing before her. That she taught you how to succeed." My stomach turned. I had my business before we even met. The woman shrugged. I know, but she's rewriting history. Just be careful. The warning echoed in my head all night. By the end of the week, the ring sat on the counter like a dead thing. She hadn't asked about it. She hadn't apologized. Instead, she paraded around in new clothes, each bag another reminder where her priorities lay. When I asked, "Where did the money come from?" she smirked and said, "From the man you say I ruined. From us." There was no us anymore, only a battlefield. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The expensive clothes, the perfect hair, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes. She was performing for someone, but I no longer knew who. Maybe not even for herself. That night, as she slept beside me, I whispered into the dark, "I don't know who you are." She stirred, murmured something, then turned away, her back a cold wall against mine. The truth was clear now. The woman I married was gone. Or maybe she had never existed at all. Maybe she had always been the greedy mask, waiting for the right moment to peel off the sweetness and reveal the hunger beneath. And if that was true, then I knew what had come next. Because masks aren't meant to last forever. It's strange how anger changes shape when you feed it silence. In the beginning, it had been fire, loud, raw, threatened to spill out in words I'd regret. But after days of her sneers, her stories, her vanity, the fire cooled into something sharper, a blade instead of a blaze. I didn't shout anymore. I didn't argue when she mocked me for not knowing the right brands or rolled her eyes at the meals I cooked. I let her prattle on about boutiques and status, her voice climbing higher when she knew her friends were listening. I sat there with my wine, nodding like the patient husband, because while she played her part, I was writing mine. At night, I studied her the way one studies an enemy, watching her tells her weaknesses. She thought I was asleep, but I listened when she whispered into her phone. She thought I didn't notice, but I caught her hiding shopping bags in the back of the closet, tearing tags off in the bathroom. The sex, when she offered it, was another performance. She'd slink into bed in silk, press her lips to mine, graze her nails across my skin. My body wanted her, God, how it wanted her, but my mind was elsewhere. I knew what she was doing, trying to bind me back with the same rope she'd once used to make me dizzy with love. One night, she climbed on top of me, her hair spilling down, her breath hot against my neck. "See," she whispered, moving slowly, deliberately. "We're fine." And even though my body bucked toward her, even though her heat wrapped around me, I saw through it. Every thrust was empty, every moan calculated. It wasn't us anymore. It was a mask moving above me. When she finally collapsed beside me, flushed and panting, I whispered into her hair, "You're good at acting." She stiffened, then rolled away without another word. The police called again a few days later, checking if I wanted to press further charges. "It's clear-cut," the officer said. "She's on the footage. We can pursue property damage fully if you want." I stared at the phone, then at her across the room, lounging with a glass of wine. She raised an eyebrow, daring me. "Not yet," I told the officer, "because revenge isn't about rushing. It's about timing." I began planting seeds. To her face, I was calm, even affectionate at times. I kissed her cheek before leaving for work, asked about her day, pretended to care when she spun more lies about our shared success. I gave her nothing to fight against. No raised voice, no wounded pride. Just a steady, unreadable calm. And beneath that calm, I gathered my evidence. The surveillance footage was one piece. The receipts she left lying around, proof of her spending sprees, were another. The whispers from her friends, those who liked gossip more than loyalty, were the third. Slowly, I collected everything into a quiet arsenal. She didn't notice. She thought my silence meant surrender. She thought I was a fool, still in love, too weak to walk away. That suited me fine. One evening, she dressed in a red cocktail dress that clung like fire to her hips. "I'm going out," she announced, not bothering to say where. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her slide on lipstick. Desire clawed at me. She was breathtaking even now, but I let it simmer beneath my control. "You look beautiful," I said softly. She glanced at me in the mirror, suspicious at first. Then she smiled faintly, satisfied. "Thank you." When she left, heels clicking down the hall, I felt a quiet rage humming inside me like a second heartbeat. She thought I was broken. She thought she could humiliate me, drain me, discard me. But what she didn't understand was that I had already decided how this story would end. And it wouldn't be with her laughter echoing over my silence. That night, I opened the drawer where the velvet box still sat. The ring sparkled under the lamplight, the tiny stone that had shattered everything. I turned it over my hand, then set it back down carefully. It wasn't a symbol of failure anymore. It was a reminder, a trigger, the moment her mask slipped. And soon enough, I'd make sure the whole world saw what I saw that day. Not a loving wife, not a partner, but a greedy mask desperate to be adored. I poured myself a drink, the ice clinking softly, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Because revenge wasn't fantasy anymore. It was a plan. Revenge doesn't begin with explosions. It begins with paper, receipts, statements, little slips of truth scattered across countertops. She was careless, always tossing bags and tags aside, bragging on the phone about investments that were nothing more than vanity stitched in silk. I started collecting. Quietly, patiently. When she left for her mysterious outings, I opened drawers and checked pockets. I took photos of receipts with my phone, $900 shoes, $1,200 jackets, dinners that cost more than my first month's rent years ago. All of it paid from accounts she never contributed to. The police report sat at my desk, official and blunt. Perpetrator identified. Wife. I hadn't pushed it further yet, but it was ammunition waiting. She still believed I was bending under her weight. That was the beauty of it. When I smiled and asked about her day, she thought she'd won. When I kissed her shoulder in the kitchen, she smirked like a queen on her throne. One evening, she invited her friends over for wine. I stayed in the living room, flipping through a magazine, listening. He was nothing before me, she told him, her voice loud enough for me to hear clearly. I gave him direction. He had no style, no ambition. Now look, he's learning. The friends tittered, sipping their glasses. I turned a page of the magazine, my jaw clenched. She had rewritten our history so often that even she seemed to believe it now. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was cataloging, recording, every lie, every insult, every smug little brag. Because stories could be weapons too, and I planned to turn hers against her. Later that night, after her friends had left and the smell of perfume still clung to the curtains, she slid into bed next to me. Her hand rested on my chest, tracing lazy circles. "You've been quiet lately," she murmured. I looked at her in the dark, the outline of her body still dazzling even when wrapped in deception. "Just thinking," I said softly. "About what?" "About us." She kissed my collarbone, satisfied with the answer. She thought she had me tethered again. But in my head, I wasn't picturing her lips. I was picturing the file on my desk, thickening with evidence of the person she had become. The next week, I met with an old friend, Tom, a lawyer I'd known since college. Over lunch, I slid him a folder. He flipped through the pages. Photos of receipts, copies of statements, the police report. His brow furrowed. "You sure about this?" "Very," I said. "This isn't just divorce prep," he warned. "This is destruction." "That's the idea," I replied. He leaned back, studying me. "Most guys, they'd scream. They'd throw her out. You're playing this cold." "She wanted performance," I said, "so I'll give her one." At home, she strutted around like the queen of a castle I'd built. She didn't notice me pulling away emotionally, because physically, I still gave her just enough. A kiss on the cheek here, a brush of my hand on her thigh there. My restraint drove me crazy. I wanted her, still, but desire was another weapon I chose to hold back, used sparingly. She didn't see it. She thought I was a fool in love, still desperate for crumbs. One evening, she asked, almost teasing, "Do you regret marrying me?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet." She laughed, not realizing I meant it literally. I started spending more time at the office, not because I needed to, but because I didn't want to watch her play dress up with my money. She didn't ask where I was. She was too busy curating her new life, painting herself as a woman who had made me, and all the while, the setup tightened. Every whisper from her friends, every careless word she said in public, every receipt I collected, all went into the pile. The mask she wore was still intact, flawless in her mind, but I knew exactly how to tear it off. And soon, she'd be standing in front of everyone, naked of her lies, stripped down to the greedy truth she thought she'd hidden so well. That night, as I lay beside her, I finally let myself imagine it. The moment her face would fall, the moment her pride would crumble. It wasn't anger that fueled me anymore. It was anticipation. Because the best revenge isn't about shouting or breaking. It's about letting the other person build their tower of vanity so high that when you finally kick it out from under them, the fall is long, brutal, unforgettable. And she was almost at the top. Reputation, is a fragile thing. For months she had polished hers to a shine. Curated outfits, carefully framed stories, practiced smiles. But a single crack, once it forms, spreads faster than she ever could imagine. It began small. A client of mine pulled me aside after a meeting. "Your wife," he said, lowering his voice. "She was talking the other night at that cocktail event. Said you wouldn't have gotten anywhere without her. That true?" I smiled faintly. "She has an imagination." He chuckled, but his eyes told me he'd already filed the story away. It wasn't admiration in his look. It was pity. Later, I heard similar things from 2 more people. Word was spreading. Not my doing, not yet, just her own arrogance, echoing back. At home, she was oblivious. She strutted around in designer shoes, sipping expensive wine, tossing her hair as if the world revolved around her reflection. "You should be proud," she told me one night. "Everyone says I'm the face of success now." I bit back a laugh. The face maybe, but faces crack when the mask slips, and hers was slipping. One Friday evening, she dragged me to a dinner with her friends, a rooftop restaurant, the city glowing beneath us. I led her whole court, telling stories of how she helped build my business, how she taught me ambition. Her friends nodded politely, but there was a tightness around their smiles I hadn't seen before. When she excused herself to the restroom, one of them leaned toward me. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. I arched a brow. "Excuse me?" She takes credit for everything. "We all know you had your company before her. It's embarrassing." I didn't answer, just sipped my drink. But inside, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. The cracks weren't just forming. They were visible now, jagged lines across the mask she wore. That night, when we got home, she tried again with sex. She slid into bed, wearing lace that clung to her skin, her body warm against mine. "Do you know how many men stare at me when I walk into a room?" she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. "I can imagine," I said. Her hand slid lower, teasing. "But you're the lucky one. You get all of me." I almost laughed at the irony. She thought she was reminding me of my prize, when all I saw was the desperation in her performance. Still, my body stirred. Desire doesn't always obey reason. I let her straddle me, her movements deliberate, her nails biting into my shoulders. She moaned low and practiced, but her eyes were elsewhere, on her reflection in the mirror across the room, watching herself, not me. When she finished, she collapsed beside me, smug. "See? We're fine." I turned, studying her profile in the dim light. "If you have to keep saying that, maybe we're not." Her eyes snapped open, flashed with anger, but she didn't reply. She just rolled away, muttering under her breath. The next day, her phone buzzed with messages from the same friend she bragged to. I caught glimpses of the screen. "Why did you say that? You're being unfair. He deserves better." Her jaw tightened as she typed replies, fast and defensive. "What's wrong?" I asked casually. "Nothing," she snapped, shoving the phone aside. But her mask was cracking now, not just in public, but in private too. I decided it was time to push a little. Over dinner, I said, "Funny thing, Tom mentioned the other day how I had contracts in place long before we met. He was surprised when I told him you said you helped me start the business." Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "You're twisting things." "Am I?" I asked, voice calm. "I just meant, I encourage you. You're misinterpreting. Or maybe you're rewriting." Her cheeks flushed. She set her fork down with a sharp clink. "Why are you trying to embarrass me?" I leaned back, smiling faintly. "I don't have to. You're doing it yourself." Her eyes narrowed into slits. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, and stormed into the bedroom. I sat there, sipping my wine, listening to the silence settle. The cracks were widening. Her friends were whispering. Her lies were unraveling, and her pride was showing its rot. She thought she still had control. She thought her mask was intact. But I could see the truth now, clear as day, and soon, so would everyone else. I used to think silence was safety, that if I kept my voice low, she would eventually calm down, return to the woman I once knew. But silence became gasoline. The calmer I stayed, the hotter her temper burned. The next week proved it. We were at a restaurant with 2 of her friends, women who had already begun to doubt her polished stories. I played my role perfectly, attentive but quiet, the husband who doesn't need to fight for credit. She, of course, couldn't help herself. "He didn't even know how to manage his own accounts when we met," she bragged, swirling her wine. I showed him what real ambition looks like. One friend coughed into her napkin. The other glanced at me quickly, then down at her plate. I smiled politely. "Funny," I said, keeping my voice light. I had been running payroll for 3 years before we met. The silence that followed was thick, awkward. Her friends shifted in their seats. My wife's cheeks turned crimson, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. "You're welcome," she snapped, "for making you into something people actually respect." The friends exchanged looks. The conversation limped forward, but the damage was done. Her lie had cracked in front of an audience she couldn't control. When we got home, she exploded. "How dare you undermine me like that?" she shouted, throwing her purse onto the couch. "Do you enjoy making me look stupid?" "You do that on your own," I said evenly. Her eyes went wild. "You think you're so clever, sitting there with your smug little smile while I, she cut herself off, chest heaving. I watched her, calm as ice. "Why you what?" "Rewrite my life so you can play queen." Her hand twitched, as if she wanted to slap me, but she caught herself. Instead, she stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. I let her have the last word that night, but inside I felt the quiet satisfaction of a man who knows the noose is tightening. The next morning, she changed tactics again. She emerged from the bedroom in a fitted dress, her smile brittle but sweet. "Let's not fight," she said, brushing a kiss against my cheek. I looked at her carefully. The makeup was flawless, the perfume expensive, but her eyes were tired. The mask was slipping, and she knew it. "Fine," I said. "No fighting." But my mind was still replaying the look on her friends' faces at dinner. That tiny flicker of doubt spreading through them was worth more than any argument I could have won at home. A few days later, the true breaking point came. She had been drinking that evening, red wine staining her lips. Her phone buzzed with messages, and I caught a glimpse of the screen as she laughed. "They're jealous. They can't handle how successful we are." I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. She froze. "What's funny?" "You," I said, still clinging to the fantasy. Her face twisted. "You bastard." She hurled the wine glass across the room. It shattered against the wall, crimson streaking down the paint like blood. I didn't flinch. I just stared at her. "You think you can humiliate me?" she screamed. "I'll show you humiliation." Her words were louder than the glass breaking. They were a confession, raw and unguarded. And that was when I realized she had no control left. Later that night, after she passed out on the bed, I cleaned up the shards of glass. The wall was stained, the rug ruined. But I didn't mind, because I had heard what I needed. She wasn't just greedy. She wasn't just vain. She was unstable. And soon, the world would see it too. Lying in bed beside her, I felt desire stir again, strange, twisted, undeniable. Even drunk and reckless, she was beautiful. My body wanted what my mind despised. That tension burned hotter than ever. But I didn't act on it. Instead, I whispered to the ceiling, "One more step, just one more and you're finished." She shifted in her sleep, muttering, then rolled away. I closed my eyes, a smile tugging at my lips. The breaking point wasn't coming. It had already arrived. It was supposed to be a simple evening. A colleague of mine had invited us to a small gathering, just a handful of business partners and their spouses. Nothing flashy. I almost didn't bring her, but something told me it was time to see how she'd handle herself outside her circle of sycophants. She spent hours getting ready, emerging in a dress that shimmered like liquid silver. I couldn't deny the effect. Every head would turn when she walked into that room. And she knew it. "You're lucky," she said, smoothing lipstick across her mouth. "Every man there will wish he had me. And every woman will be grateful they don't." I muttered under my breath. She didn't hear. Or maybe she chose not to. The evening began politely enough. Glasses clinked, small talk hummed, and the city lights outside the window painted the room in gold. For a while she played her part well. Charming, laughing, brushing her hand against my arm to remind everyone she was attached. But it never lasts. By the second glass of champagne, she was telling her favorite story. "When I met him, he had nothing," she declared to the group, pointing at me like I was a prop. "No style, no direction. I taught him ambition. I made him into what you see now." The words landed like knives. The room went uncomfortably quiet. I saw my colleague's wife arch an eyebrow. My colleague himself clear his throat and tried to change the subject. But she barreled on, too drunk on attention to notice. "He acts like he runs his business," she sneered. "But let me tell you, if it weren't for me, he'd still be some nobody in a cheap suit." That was it, the final straw. I let the silence hang for a moment, then spoke evenly, my voice calm but cutting. Actually, I said, locking eyes with the man across from me, my company had been running for 3 years before we even met. She had nothing to do with it. Gasps rippled around the table. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed to slits. You liar, she spat, slamming her glass down so hard the stem cracked. How dare you embarrass me in front of these people? Embarrass you? I asked, my tone cool. You've done that yourself. All I did was correct the record. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. You wouldn't be anything without me, she shrieked, pointing at me, her voice rising high and shrill. Heads turned from other tables. A waiter froze mid-step. My colleague stared, horrified. The polished mask she had worn for so long was gone, shattered in front of strangers. And I didn't lift a finger. She stormed out, heels clattering across the marble floor. For a moment, the room remained frozen. Then my colleague cleared his throat. I apologize, I said calmly, standing. She's under stress. But I could see it in their eyes. Pity for me, yes, but also disgust for her. The story she'd built was collapsing. The whispers would travel faster than she ever could. When I got home that night, she was waiting, pacing the living room like a caged animal. How dare you humiliate me like that, she screamed, in front of your partners. I shrugged down my jacket and hung it neatly on the chair. You humiliated yourself. I just refused to carry the lie anymore. Her face twisted with fury. She lunged toward me, nails flashing, but I caught her wrists easily. For a moment we stood there, bodies pressed together, her chest heaving against mine. Even in her rage, she was intoxicating. My body responded, betrayed me. I could smell her perfume, feel the heat of her skin, the dangerous nearness of her lips. And God help me, I wanted her, but I pushed her back. You've had your stage, I said coldly. Now it's my turn. She froze, confusion flickering through her eyes. But I didn't explain. Not yet. Later, lying in bed, she turned away from me, silent. I watched her shoulders rise and fall, her body tense under the sheets. I reached into the nightstand and pulled out the velvet box, opening it in the dark. The small diamond winked up at me, a cruel little star. This was the beginning of the end, I thought. The ring had started it all, and would end with her stripped of everything she thought she deserved. Because tonight wasn't just another fight. Tonight was a final straw. And soon, everyone would know exactly who she really was. The morning after her outburst at the dinner, the apartment was silent. She avoided me, stomping around in her robe, slamming cabinets, muttering curses under her breath. But she wouldn't look me in the eye. That was fine. I didn't need her eyes anymore, because I wasn't playing defense now. I was moving pieces. I pulled out the folder I'd been building for weeks. Receipts, statements, copies of the police report. Cold facts she couldn't rewrite with her mouth. Evidence doesn't lie. People do. I spent the day sending quiet messages. To colleagues. To acquaintances. To one or two of her closest friends. The ones who whispered doubts to me already. I didn't rant or accuse. I just shared documents. A snapshot of her vandalism report. A copy of a $1,200 receipt for a jacket bought the same day she claimed we were saving together. A photo of my first business license, dated years before she appeared in my life. No words attached. Just proof. Enough for them to see the truth for themselves. By evening, the whispers had turned into cracks of thunder. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the counter while she sat scrolling in growing panic. I could hear fragments of her replies. They're lying. He's twisting everything. That's not how it happened. She slammed the phone down and glared at me. What did you do? I sipped my drink calmly. Nothing. I just stopped protecting you. Her face paled, then flushed. You bastard. You think you can ruin me? I'm smarter than you. I'll fix this. But her voice shook. She knew the walls were closing in. The next night, we attended another event. She insisted, desperate to patch her image. A gallery opening, full of people who knew both of us. She arrived in a glittering gown, plastering on her brightest smile, holding my arm like we were still the picture of success. But the moment we walked in, I felt the shift. Eyes lingered. Whispers stirred. A couple of women whispered behind manicured hands. Men gave me looks, not pitying this time, but respectful, sympathetic. She tried to command attention, laughing loudly, telling another story of how she built us. But no one leaned in. No one believed her anymore. I watched her falter, Her smile twitched, the mask slipping as the crowd politely avoided her. It was the exposure she'd feared all along, but it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was worse. It was subtle, quiet, the slow drowning of someone who thought the water would always stay shallow. When we got home, she lost control. "You're destroying me," she screamed, throwing her heels across the room. "Do you know what people are saying? They think I'm crazy. They think I'm a liar." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Maybe because you are." She froze, her chest heaving, eyes wide with fury. "I made you. You'd be nothing without me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a razor's edge. "I was everything before you. You were nothing until me. And now, you'll be less than nothing when I'm finished." For a moment, she just stared at me, trembling. Her lips parted like she wanted to scream again but couldn't find the air. Then she turned away, retreating to the bedroom and slamming the door. That night, I didn't join her. I slept on the couch, the velvet box resting on the table beside me. I opened it once, staring at the ring that had started the war. It wasn't just jewelry. It was proof that love without trust is worthless, that greed eats everything it touches. I slid the box shut and smiled in the dark, because the mask wasn't just cracking now. It was shattering, and I was the one holding the hammer. The apartment was too quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum softer, as if it didn't want to interrupt the war that had settled between us. She stayed in the bedroom most days now, curtains drawn, phone clutched in her hand as though she could still control her shrinking kingdom through text messages. But the kingdom was gone. I had seen it in the way people looked at her at the gallery, the way conversations drifted away when she opened her mouth. She had become the spectacle, not the queen, and I had put her there. The thought should have filled me with guilt. Instead, it tasted like power. One evening, I found her sitting on the edge of bed, still in her robe, makeup smudged as though she tried to put it on and given up. "You're killing me," she whispered, voice raw. "You're turning everyone against me." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." Her eyes glistened with rage and desperation. "You don't understand. Without me, people will think you're heartless, cruel. They'll say you abandoned your wife. They'll say you destroyed my car, humiliated me in public, lied about building what I built." I said flatly, "They'll say you wore a mask until it cracked." She flinched, and for the first time I saw fear there. Not anger, not pride. Fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I poured a drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the velvet box. The ring inside gleamed faintly under the light, its small stone catching shadows. That little piece of carbon had revealed everything. It was never about size or price. It was about her. Her reaction had been pure, unfiltered truth. Greed, entitlement, vanity. The mask had slipped, and I'd seen the woman beneath. Now the question gnawed at me. How far should I go? I had the power to finish her. Divorce papers, legal charges, total exposure. I could strip away everything she thought gave her value until she was left with nothing but the hollow reflection of who she pretended to be. Or I could stop here, let her stew in the ruins of her reputation. Let her live knowing she'd lost control, without needing me to press the final button. Both paths tempted me. The next day, she tried one last time to reach for me. She came into the living room wearing the red dress I'd once loved, the one that made men turn their heads. She sat beside me, her thigh brushing mine, her perfume heavy and sweet. "You still want me?" she whispered, leaning close. "I can feel it." And she was right. My body betrayed me, stirring with heat at her nearness. Desire clashed with disgust in a storm that left me dizzy. For a moment, I almost gave in. I almost pulled her into my lap, kissed her until we forgot the war. But then I remembered the laughter of her friends, the glass shards on my car seat, the shrill sound of her voice in the restaurant calling me nothing. I pulled back. She froze, searching my face for weakness. "So that's it? You'll throw me away?" I exhaled slowly. "No, you already threw yourself away. I'm just deciding whether I bury what's left." Her mouth opened, then shut. She had no answer. That night, I stood at the window, staring out at the city lights. Behind me, the bedroom door was closed, her shadow faint beneath it. The choice weighed on me, not because I doubted she deserved destruction, but because I wasn't sure what it would make me deliver it. A man reclaiming his dignity, or a man consumed by the same cruelty I despise in her. I didn't know yet. But one thing was certain, the next step would be the last. And whichever path I chose, there would be no turning back.